Hi, I'm Matt Russell. We're at Coyote Run Farm. We're part of the Sea Change project with Iowa State University. We were really excited not only to see change, but the whole sea of carbon and where we're going in agriculture. We're really excited to be part of something that looks forward to where we think agriculture is going with ecosystem services, and just really fun to be part of that. We're seeding about 7 acres of prairie today. What we'll do with that is establish it, and then we'll use our cattle to graze it back and manage it that way. And I think they're doing some research to see what kind of biomass can come from this multi-species prairie grass system. Well, I think we're on the cusp of a real revolution in agriculture. We're shifting from the era of using fossil fuels to force nature to do what we needed it to do, which was increase yields, and that's been very successful. But clearly going forward, we're going to have to rethink how we're doing agriculture, which we always have. It's part of being a farmer, as you always are changing. But we're really in a place where we're going to have to make in the next 10 years, 15 years, some really interesting changes where we shift from, using fossil fuels to force nature to do what we need it to do in agriculture to partnering with nature to do what we need to do. So we're still going to need to yield and grow commodities, but we're also going to have to do ecosystem services as part of that whole production system. And to be on the front line of that transformation is really exciting. I love hypothesizing, right? I'm out there doing stuff on the farm and thinking about what about this and what about, I can't really execute on that, right? I can't really do the research, and it's so a lot of it's hypothesis and trial and error, and that's fun and part of being a farmer. But to actually partner with a research institution that's we're partnering together to test these hypotheses and gather the data that then gets shared in the public domain. It helps us as farmers be better on this farm, but then it also helps the whole state, be able to improve agricultural systems. Well, one of the things that's different on our plot is that we are chemical free on this farm. We've been chemical free since probably about 2008. And then I think the last time we used industrial fertilizers was about 2012. And so we're operating our 110 acres with cattle and a little bit of produce on the idea that we're trying to manage the biological cycles and the nutrient cycles with livestock and with rotations and so no chemicals. So that's a little bit different, I think, for our 7 acres than some of the others, is that we're not doing a burn down. We had to do some tillage, some light tillage, not deep tillage, but light tillage to knock back the forage that's there to create the space for the native grasses. So I think that's a little bit different. And then we're going to be grazing. So at some point, once it gets established enough, we'll be rotating our cows through there. And that's really interesting to see how they respond to native forage, because they're pretty much used to alfalfa and clover and brome, timothy, and orchard grass. Yeah, I wear quite a few different hats. I wear my Coyote Run Farm hat as a farmer. Grew up on a farm, and I'd like to say I think it's 41 of the 51 years I've been alive, I've lived at 2 residences, the farm I grew up on and the farm we now own. But I also wear this hat, Iowa Interfaith Power and Light. I'm a faith leader. As a faith-based organization looking at climate solutions, there is nothing more powerful than we can do than invite farmers in their own vocation as farmers to be part of the solutions to climate change. And that's been really powerful. So yeah, I wear this hat. I wear my Coyote Run Farm hat. I wear my political hat sometimes. And they all work together in who I am as someone who wants to live my life making the world a better place. So farmers are engaged in water quality and water quantity, resilience to extreme weather, and more are really interested in mitigation. So what can I do on my farm that actually reduces emissions and sequesters carbon versus just being resilient? I think generally speaking, the farmers who are focused on water quality are more likely to be focused on carbon as well. But I think the difference is that what we're seeing now is on carbon and emissions and climate action, we're starting to see some real dollars out there. And I think that's a game changer. So farmers who want to do that as part of their ethic, and they're actually excited about it. They're excited about managing their farm for more living systems and more vitality on the landscape. They're excited about that. The difference is that when they start to see that there's economic incentives to do that, then it becomes not just something that they feel good about doing, but it actually is part of their farming business. And that's where you're going to start to see real change. And I'm hopeful that that's happening. When we look at what's going to give us the best opportunities for carbon capture and reduced emissions, is this kind of more complex systems approach where you can do kind of one-off carbon practices, but they're not very robust, right? If you just put cover crops on the whole state, that's better, but it's not, it doesn't take it like exponentially to another level. But if on a farm you're doing cover crops, you're managing your tillage, you're integrating some livestock into that, you're expanding the crop rotations, you're using different varieties. So you're instead of, you know, a three variety forage mix, you've got a 7 or 8 or 10 or 12. Those are the kind of things that not only do better for carbon, but they also create wildlife benefit, they clean up the water. So we have to think about this in a holistic way. And that's my concern, is that part of where we're headed is this kind of carbon exchange where it's like, I'm polluting and I'm buying from you to allow me to pollute, and we're just putting carbon services. That misses a huge opportunity where we're actually creating an agricultural system that is very diverse, very robust, and we get a broad set of public benefits, including, you know, food and fiber and biofuels and the products that we think of, but also then these ecosystem services, you know, like water quality, water quantity, cleaner air, carbon capture, and greater, you know, wildlife habitat as well. When we talk about integrating livestock, what we're really saying is that we have some really leaky systems in our agricultural, our livestock production. And we have to shift so that we're raising animals, and some of them are going to be confined. I mean, we do rotational grazing. That's confined animals, right? So it's not that we're confining animals that are the problem, it's that are our systems polluting? Are they leaking? Or are they in fact like accelerating good processes? And I think, you know, particularly with cattle, getting them out there where we're not pulling the feed from the field and putting it in, like the cattle are doing that work. And then in some of the other livestock systems, are we actually managing the manure as a resource rather than just getting rid of a waste? And way too much in this state, we're still getting rid of waste. And we talk about it as a nutrient, but if you're really going to integrate that system, you've got to incentivize the farmer to have that livestock be part of that cropping system in the most efficient way possible, with not only reversing the leakage, the pollution, but actually shifting it 180 degrees to where that whole system is making everything healthier. It's totally possible. It's doable. And we could be doing that across the state. And, you know, we can still have an enormous amount of livestock. We can still have an enormous amount of, you know, corn and soybeans, but we've got to have a lot of other things on the land as well. And those things have to work together so that all the nutrients are being taken up by the plants, right? And not just thrown out there as waste and then adding industrial nutrients on top of it as insurance. We've got a lot of work to do. But as a farmer, when I look at the work that needs to be done, I know that if the incentives are there for me to do that, I can do it. And a lot of us really want to. We really have to think about what we're doing to incentivize our agricultural systems. And one of the things that farmers are really clear about is that right now we have incentives that reward bad actors. So we reward polluting systems, and then the farmers that are doing it really well and making the investments for a healthier system, we don't incentivize that. And in some ways, they have to make an investment that long term is the reward comes back, but on a short-term basis, they take the risk and all the outlay is from them. Where the neighbor that has this kind of polluting, leaky system, they've got risk management tools, they've got cost share tools, they've got subsidies. So we're incentivizing exactly the wrong kinds of things. And so, yeah, we need to really look at how we're incentivizing to get these better systems on the land.